I joined the company straight out of college 7.5 years ago. Back then, we were 4 guys and a rented space above a dentist's office. No HR, no VPN, no real structure, just duct tape and ideas. I stayed late, fixed what broke, built what didn't exist. Over time, the system I architected became the backbone of the business, payments, client syncing, audit trails, reconciliation, the works. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. And more importantly, it worked quietly. You don't notice oxygen until it's gone. Same with systems like mine. When my direct boss, the only one who really understood what I did, retired, everything changed. 2 weeks later, the board brought in a new CTO. Let's call him Rick. Rick was one of those MBA guys. Clean suits, shiny words, zero technical depth. The kind who builds strategy decks with terms like synergy and agile acceleration and somehow still gets paid more than the people holding the walls up. For the first couple of weeks, Rick said all the right things. We want to understand our core infrastructure better, he told me. Your work's been invaluable. I played along, gave him the rundown, answered his questions. Then on a Tuesday morning, I got the email. It was 2 paragraphs long, politely worded. HRCC Ed. My position was being restructured. I had 30 days to transition knowledge to a junior engineer they'd brought on to learn the ropes. Let's call the kid Evan. 24, fresh out of a boot camp, barely knew how to grep logs. Rick wanted me to train him in the next 4 weeks to run an entire ecosystem that had taken me nearly a decade to build and maintain. When I raised concerns gently, Rick didn't even look up from his laptop. He just said, "We're moving in a new direction. I'm sure you'll land on your feet." Then he added almost casually, "Unless you'd rather not complete the transition. In that case, I can terminate you today for inadequate qualifications." That last phrase hit me like a switch flipped in my chest. Inadequate qualifications. That was the moment the plan began forming in my mind. Not for revenge. Not yet. Just a quiet promise to myself. They don't know what they've done. I didn't argue. Didn't slam the door or fire off some dramatic resignation email. That's not my style. I nodded, told Rick I'd begin drafting the documentation, and went back to my desk. But that night, I pulled out the original employment contract I'd signed nearly 8 years earlier. Back when the company was still small, when legal paperwork was something pulled from a free template and printed at the local FedEx. I read every line. Twice. And then a third time slowly. There it was, or more accurately, there it wasn't. No intellectual property clause. No inventions assignment. No mention of ownership over software developed during employment. Nothing. At the time, nobody cared. We were just trying to survive. Yeah? That oversight meant something very different. The next day, I called someone I trusted. Let's call her Mallory. She's an intellectual property attorney I'd worked with years ago on a side project that never saw daylight. Smart. Sharp. Zero tolerance for bullshit. I sent her a copy of my contract. She called me back 30 minutes later. "You still own it," she said. "The system. Unless they got you to sign something later on, which I doubt, they have no claim. And if you built that architecture solo even while employed and it wasn't explicitly assigned to them, it's yours. Especially if you can prove authorship." I could. I had design diagrams, version history, private commits. I had emails from the early days, my old boss asking me to run with the platform stuff. It was all archived. Mallory added, "They'll try to bluff. Probably threaten litigation. But the law is on your side. U.S. Copyright Code, Sections 101 and 201. No contract, no ownership." I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The plan still hadn't fully formed, but the outline was there. Later that week, I watched Evan fumble his way through the dev console. He had no idea how deep the ecosystem ran, how many invisible threads it touched, how much damage could be done if someone unqualified started pulling strings. And Rick? He'd already moved on. Called the system legacy like that was an insult. That was fine. Let them pretend it was obsolete. Soon, they'd find out what life looked like without it. I waited until I was 2 weeks from my official last day. Long enough to be forgotten in the chaos, short enough to still matter. The memo I wrote was short, formal, and deliberate. No emotion. No threats. Just facts. Per the terms of my original employment agreement and the absence of any intellectual property assignment, I retain full rights to the software systems I developed during my tenure. I will not be transferring knowledge, documentation, or ownership of said systems unless a licensing agreement is reached. I CC'd HR, legal, and Rick. Rick responded the next day with a 3-line email. No greeting. This is not a valid position. You developed these systems while employed here. They are company property. I expect full cooperation until your last day. Failure to do so may result in forfeiture of severance and potential legal consequences. I didn't respond. I sent the message to Mallory instead. She drafted a reply on my behalf, citing case law, InReach Technologies versus Embedded Solutions 2003, CC&VV, Read, and the relevant sections of the Copyright Act. Rick went quiet for 3 days. Then he came at me harder. Had HR send me a notice demanding all architecture files, diagrams, and login details. They framed it as part of the termination protocol. I forwarded it to Mallory. She replied directly to them. My client is under no obligation to deliver proprietary assets not assigned by contract. Any attempt to access, co-opt, or replicate his code without a licensing agreement constitutes infringement. That same afternoon, Rick stopped me in the hallway. He tried to play it cool, but the corners of his mouth were tight. Look, I'm not here to fight, he said. We're just trying to move forward. Let's find a compromise. I told him I was open to a conversation if it involved a formal licensing deal. He sneered. You're not thinking clearly. Do you understand the doors you're closing for yourself here? I've been in this industry 20 years. I looked him dead in the eye. Then you should have read the contract. And I walked away. That night, I turned off the server pings. No patches. No updates. No maintenance scripts. Let's see how long they last without oxygen. It took 5 days for the first signs of trouble to show. A client's invoice bounced because the payment reconciliation system didn't trigger. That part had always run on a small background service I built myself, quiet, efficient, invisible. No one even knew it existed. Until it failed. Then came the ticket floods. Payment delays. Wrong customer tiers. A high-tier client was mistakenly marked as inactive, causing their subscription to lapse. They emailed support furious, CCNG their entire legal team. Evan, per kid, had no clue what to do. He was still trying to figure out the difference between staging and production environments. He pasted console errors into Slack-like prayers and stared at them like they might answer back. I kept my head down. Said nothing. Did my transition duties exactly as outlined by HR, clean desk, exit interview, badge return? No more. No less. A week later, Rick brought in outside counsel. Let's call him Barrett, corporate type, all jawline and legalese. I could tell he was hoping I'd flinch. Barrett tried a new approach. Instead of accusing me, he went soft. We understand this system is important to you, but the company relied on it. Surely you recognize the legal risks of withholding something you built while salaried. Mallory came prepared. Per the Copyright Act, authorship defaults to the creator unless there's an express transfer. There wasn't. Your client's mistake doesn't give them a retroactive claim. Barrett pivoted. Claimed the system was now a trade secret and that I was interfering with business operations. He cited vague tort claims, tried to corner me into admitting that my silence was malicious. Mallory didn't blink. There's no NDA. No confidentiality clause. No trademark registration. He owes no obligation to assist you in salvaging what your client chose to dismantle. Rick's face was red the whole meeting. I knew what was going through his mind. He was used to being the smartest guy in the room. Used to people folding the second he mentioned legal. Not this time. By the end of the week, the board got involved. I heard whispers through the grapevine, missed revenue targets, angry client calls, a backlog so massive the entire customer service team had to pull overtime. And they hadn't even hit the end-of-month cycle yet. That was when the real bleeding would start. By the time the end-of-month reconciliation rolled around, the system was gasping. One of the sales guys, let's call him Dan, sent out invoices using an outdated export tool. He didn't realize it pulled stale data from a deprecated API endpoint. Half the clients were billed twice. The other half weren't billed at all. Support lit up like a Christmas tree. I wasn't there to see it, but someone in finance forwarded me a screenshot of the company's internal Slack channel. A single message from Rick, timestamp 2:42 a.m. Can someone explain why none of the transaction records are matching? No one replied for 6 hours. I'd predicted this. The ecosystem wasn't just a bunch of scripts, it was an interwoven platform of dependencies, database optimizers, scheduled fallbacks, internal tools that checked for drift between invoice generation and actual ledger entries. None of it was documented. Because for 7 years, no one asked. They just trusted it to work. Now it wasn't. The company lost 2 major clients that week. One of them had been with us since the beginning. Their CTO wrote a parting email that read more like a breakup letter. We no longer feel confident in your ability to support our needs. The board started breathing down Rick's neck. And the money? That's when it got ugly. I found out through a former colleague, let's call him Wes, still on the inside, that the company had been forced to hire 8 full-time engineers to rebuild what I'd maintained solo. 8. Each brought on at $110,000 plus base, plus benefits. A rebuild timeline of 6 months. Minimum. Rick had told the board I was easily replaceable. Now he was burning $80,000 a month trying to prove it. Even worse, they had no starting point. No architecture diagram. Just pieces of an Excel dump I'd given them, technically compliant with the transition request, but entirely useless without context. Rick called Mallory again. Offered a reconciliation agreement, a lump sum for a one-time knowledge transfer. She didn't even bring it to me. We're past that, she told him. Your client made his decision. Rick hung up before she finished the sentence. He'd underestimated me. They all had. They thought I was just another engineer with no leverage. They forgot who built the system they couldn't live without. The final step wasn't an act of vengeance. It was closure. I logged in using my personal credentials, still valid, though I knew they'd be revoked soon enough. The system ran on cloud architecture, but the foundation was mine: deployment keys, automated backups, and sandboxed services that still pinged from my original remote. I packaged the last 3 years of runtime data, transactions, logs, metrics into a single Excel workbook. Not CSVs, not SQL exports. Excel. It was legitimate. Compliant even, but barely readable unless you knew how I thought. Every sheet was layered with cross-referenced VLOOKUPs, pivot tables, and nested logic. Some fields were base 64 encoded. A few had macros tied to external references. If anyone asked, I could point to the official request from HR, please export historical records in a readable format. Excel was readable. Technically. Once the dump was complete, I deleted the ecosystem from their servers. Not maliciously, just my code. My IP. Anything tied to repositories I owned, anything stored in spaces linked to my cloud credentials. It wasn't sabotage. It was withdrawal. Mallory had warned them. Repeatedly. Within 24 hours, I received confirmation that my access had been formally revoked. They were closing ranks. It didn't matter. The damage wasn't in what I took. It was in what they lost the moment they let me walk out the door. That same week, I got a message from Wes. Rick had been pulled into an emergency board meeting. No press release. No formal goodbye. Just gone. 3 sentences in an internal memo, effective immediately. Rick will be stepping away from his role. We thank him for his service. The board had finally added up the numbers. Over $300,000 lost in client attrition. $200,000 in billing errors and chargebacks. $600,000 budgeted for a system rebuild that might never reach parity. And all of it avoidable for the price of keeping one engineer they never bothered to understand. They thought they'd replaced a piece of code. They had no idea they'd severed the heartbeat. 2 weeks passed. I didn't think about them much. The silence was strange at first. No error pings, no weekend fire drills, no whispered calls asking if I had just a second. My mornings stretched. My inbox stayed empty. For the first time in years, my workday ended when I closed the laptop, not when the server logs stopped blinking red. Then came the email. It was from someone on the board, let's call her Elaine. Formal, polite, and more than a little desperate. We understand your departure may not have unfolded under ideal circumstances. In light of recent transitions, we'd like to open a conversation about a possible return either in a senior consulting capacity or as part of a new leadership structure. Translation: Rick was gone and they wanted to fix what he broke. She offered a calendar link. Said the board was prepared to discuss equity options and full autonomy over infrastructure rebuild strategy. It was tempting. Not because of the title or the money, I knew what the architecture was worth. But part of me wanted to walk back and just to see their faces when I sat at the head of the table. I waited a few days, then wrote back. I appreciate the outreach. But this situation made one thing clear: the value of my work was never in the code. It was in the trust. And that's something you broke. I won't be returning. No anger. No gloating. Just truth. Elaine never replied. She didn't need to. The next week, I heard through Wes that they'd started negotiating with outside firms to license third-party platforms, slower, clunkier, and 4 times more expensive. They'd spend the next year trying to patch together something that vaguely resembled what I'd built alone. But I was already thinking past them. I'd started retooling the core of my system, cleaning up the logic, building a proper UI, and modularizing the components. Not for them. For me. I filed a provisional patent. Bought a domain. Registered an LLC. I wasn't going back. They taught me something valuable. My work wasn't just a job. It was a product. And now, for the first time, I owned it in full. I started small. Quiet. No pitch decks. No social media blast. Just a clean landing page, a product demo, and a simple offer: low overhead, high efficiency infrastructure for subscription-based businesses. The same core system, rebuilt from the ground up, this time with clarity, scalability, and a license attached. Within the first month, 2 companies reached out. Both were run by former clients who had heard whispers about what had happened. One of them asked me directly, "Is it true you built that whole system on your own?" I didn't answer with words. I just showed them the new demo. They signed within a week. No bloated meetings, no politics, just engineers talking to engineers. I offered full integration support and a licensing model that scaled with usage. By the end of the quarter, I was netting more per month than I'd ever made in salary. It was strange at first, watching revenue land in my account without anyone else's name attached. No approvals, no sign-offs, no last-minute rewrites by people who barely understood what they were changing. This time, everything was mine. The product, the structure, the reputation. At one point, I heard a rumor through Wes that someone from my old company had asked one of my new clients how they liked the rebuild. The client reportedly laughed. "We didn't use their system," he told them. "We licensed the original." That stung them more than I ever could have hoped. I wasn't just gone, I'd become their competition. Better still, I didn't have to chase them. They were too busy trying to duct tape their disaster together. I wasn't interested in revenge through headlines. I wanted something cleaner, quieter, and longer lasting. Independence. That's the thing people like Rick never understand. They think power is in the title, the org chart, the boardroom. But real power? It's in being untouchable. In building something no one else can replace. And knowing that the moment they stopped valuing you, you stopped needing them. The message came from a former project manager, let's call him Travis. We'd worked together on some of the earliest client onboarding flows. He was one of the few who'd ever said thank you when a crisis was quietly averted. His note was short. Just thought you'd want to know Rick's officially out of the industry. Word got around. No one wants to touch him after what happened. No part of me felt triumph. Just finality. The kind of silence that follows a long, dragged-out storm. It wasn't personal, not anymore. Rick did what people like him always do. He bet against the quiet guy in the corner, the one who doesn't self-promote or showboat. The one they think is replaceable because he doesn't talk like a manager. But Rick was wrong. Not just about me, but about the cost of what he threw away. Later that week, another email arrived. This one from a name I didn't recognize. She ran a mid-sized consulting firm and said she'd heard about what happened through a former Veridian contractor, though she never said the company's name and I never asked. She wanted to explore licensing options. Said her team had been spending months trying to replicate a platform she heard I'd built. We scheduled a call. After walking her through the updated architecture, she paused and said, "It's rare to see something this efficient and this personal. It's like the system actually understands what people need from it." That line stayed with me, because that's what the company never understood. It wasn't just code. It was craft. Every piece had been shaped by experience, real pain, real bugs, real edge cases that only show up at scale. And now that knowledge was packaged, polished, and paid for on my terms. That night, I poured a drink and stood out on my balcony. I thought about the years I gave them. The late nights, the quiet fixes, the weekends I worked through while others clocked out. And how they threw all of that away in pursuit of cost savings. Now, I was earning more, working less, and building something sustainable. No boards. No bosses. No middlemen. Just me. Owning every line, every license, every decision. It wasn't revenge. It was resolution. A year later, I got an email that stopped me cold. It wasn't from an exec or recruiter or investor. It was from a systems engineer in Ohio. Let's call him Brian. Mid-30s. Said he'd been laid off by a new VP who brought in outside contractors to streamline costs. Sound familiar? He'd read about my platform through a quiet dev blog I hadn't touched in months. Said it reminded him of what he used to build back when he was trusted. Before someone with polished shoes and no context decided he was too expensive. "I didn't know we were allowed to take it back," he wrote. "That we could own what we created." That stuck with me more than any paycheck ever did. Because in the end, that's what this was really about. Not payback. Not punishment. Just proving a point the right people would recognize. You can be underestimated, discarded, replaced on paper, and still come out owning the very thing they thought they took. You just have to protect what's yours. Quietly. Thoroughly. With more patience than they assume you have. After I read Brian's message, I replied with a link. It was a free version of a modular dev tool I built off the original system. A stripped-down replica for solo developers to launch their own infrastructure with full documentation and lifetime updates. I told him no license fee. Just pay it forward when you can. I didn't need to ruin anyone. I didn't need headlines. All I needed was to take what I built, what I bled for, and make it mine again. And now it was. The ecosystem lives on, but not in the hands of executives who saw it as a line item. It lives in the hands of engineers who understand the quiet brilliance of something that just works. Who protect it, respect it, own it. As for me, I work when I want. License when it's worth it. Say no more than I say yes. My calendar's clean. My sleep is deep. And every day I wake up knowing. They thought I was disposable. Now I'm unforgettable. And I didn't destroy them to win. I just let them destroy themselves.